Have you ever been sitting in class and your professor starts talking about theory and you can just feel your eyes start to glaze over and you think to yourself, come on, teach me something practical. What is even the point of a theory? My name is Dr. Bailey Benedict, and today we're going to talk about how to use social science theories and why theories are actually a lot more practical than they seem. This presentation is designed to help you understand what theories are, why we use them in research, and how to think critically about different types of theoretical lenses when you're learning about them in class. Theories aren't just hunches or guesses that we have about the world. They're an explanation for why things happen the way they do. They explain natural or social behaviors, events, or phenomena. More specifically, a scientific theory is a system of constructs and propositions that collectively present a logical, systematic, and coherent explanation of a phenomenon of interest with some assumptions or boundary conditions. System of constructs, these are the different concepts that we might be interested in. It could be social support, resilience, charisma, anything really that is kind of relevant to the discussion that we're having. Propositions then are the relationships between those constructs. So does social support predict resilience? Does charisma predict better leadership? We present a logical and systematic as well as coherent explanation of how those things work together to explain this thing that we're interested in. And we may have some assumptions that we need to hold true in order for people to use our theory. In the communication theory of resilience, an assumption is that communication and resilience are both processes. They happen over time. And then we have boundary conditions. So our theory might work in this case, but not in other cases. The boundary of our theory is basically the limits of where we can apply it and where we can't. There are a couple of different types of theoretical explanations. Most of the time when we hear the word theory, we're hearing people use it in the ideographic explanation sense. In that sense, it's explaining a single situation or event in its unique context. So you might have a theory about why someone quit their job. A nomothetic explanation seeks to explain a breadth of situations or events rather than just a specific instance. You might have a nomothetic explanation that theorizes why people more generally quit their jobs. So that ideographic explanation is kind of colloquial theory usually, and then the nomothetic explanation is how we see theories in an academic or research sense. Theories help us explain why things are the way they are, not just how things are. Our empirical and observational explanations are data, facts, and findings. Those can kind of quantify or illustrate something that's occurring in the world. Then we also have conceptual explanations. Those are typologies, taxonomies, collections, where we're taking different things and kind of putting them into categories and explaining how this thing is different from that thing is different from that thing. Theory is something that takes those empirical observations and those conceptual ideas and puts them together in kind of a logical argument that helps make sense of these trends that we're noticing across our data, across our conceptual understandings of things. There are lots of different benefits for using theories in research. They can help us explain why things happen by identifying causes, effects, and then the underlying processes that are making things happen or altering the way that things happen. They can help us make sense of past research by organizing these findings and resolving the conflicting results. Maybe there's a theory that explains why one scholar found one thing and another scholar found the other thing. They can help us guide future studies by highlighting important topics and relationships to explore because we have those concepts that are clearly identified and the relationships that are explained. Researchers in the future can go out and test those things to make sure they hold up or to see if they hold up in different contexts. And then we build cumulative knowledge by connecting ideas across our theory and offering new perspectives. As useful as theories are, there are some limitations of using theories in research. And by definition, a theory is trying to kind of simplify and explain a phenomenon to us, and sometimes it can simplify it too much. We might not be providing an adequate explanation of the phenomenon because we have a limited set of constructs that are involved, or we have a limited set of relationships that are involved. In addition, using a theory, this explanatory tool, can sometimes cause a researcher to impose blinders on themselves or limit their range of vision, and that can cause them to miss out on important concepts or relationships that are not necessarily defined in the theory, but might also be important. We need to use our theories carefully when we're using them in research. I want to go back to what actually a theory is so we can get at what's underneath the theory, those building blocks of the theory. Theories, according to Wetton, are intended to explain the what, how, why, and who, when, and where of a situation or a phenomenon. And when these things come together in a coherent way, we get a theoretical explanation that helps us make sense of a complicated reality. With the what, we're looking at the variables, the constructs, the concepts that are important for explaining this phenomenon. When we look at the how, we're interested in how those factors are related. Usually with how, we're introducing causation. So we're theorizing that this one thing causes the other thing. We're also interested in the why, and the why are these underlying psychological, economic, and social dynamics that justify how we've selected the factors that we selected and how we've proposed the causal relationships that we did. This why generally comprises the theory's assumptions. When it comes to who, when, and where, we are answering the question, what are the boundaries or limitations of the theory? How can we identify anomalies or account for them in our why? How can we improve the explanation that our theory provides with applications to new contexts and new areas? Let's look at an example of a theory so we can piece apart what the building blocks of that theory are. We'll use uncertainty reduction theory proposed by Berger and Calabrese in 1975. This theory explains how individuals reduce their uncertainty when interacting with strangers. So it suggests that when we meet somebody new, we feel a little bit uncertain, and we're trying to gather information through observation and small talk and asking questions in order to reduce our uncertainty and feel more comfortable in the situation and with the person. So uncertainty reduction theory is a great example of how a theory can help us explain a really common human experience. I'm sure you've all felt uncertain when meeting a new person at one time or another. When we're looking at the what, we're looking at those concepts that are related to our experience of feeling uneasy when we meet a new person. One of those concepts is uncertainty, and that's the lack of predictability or knowledge about the stranger. And the second is information-seeking strategies, and these can be passive, like observing the other person, active, like asking a third party, what do you know about that person? Or interactive, where we ask a direct question to the stranger that we're encountering. The how gets at how these two things are related to each other. Well, we're motivated by the potential value of an interaction that we might have with a person, a future interaction that we might have with a person, and any deviance or strange behavior that we see out of that person to reduce our uncertainty. And when we experience greater uncertainty, this theory argues that we will have more information-seeking behavior. So that's one of those causal relationships. They argue greater uncertainty causes more information-seeking behavior. But what's the underlying why of why that relationship or these relationships would exist? One is psychological. Having information gives us this sense of control. When we have control, our anxiety is reduced and we feel more comfortable. Another is a social explanation, which is that our early conversations and relationship building hinge on us making sense of what's going on and getting to know this person better. The who, when, and where kind of get at when this theory is relevant, what situations, what contexts, what people. And a potential critique is that this theory assumes that we always want to reduce our uncertainty when we meet new people, and it assumes that uncertainty is always negative. You might think of a person that you've met where you're excited about that person, they're kind of mysterious, and you want there to be question marks still because you're excited about the process of getting to know them. That theory might not be applicable in that area. Maybe we want to manage uncertainty. So Brasher's came in with uncertainty management theory that argued we may want to maintain or decrease or even embrace uncertainty depending on the context. All right, that's enough of theories from the research perspective. I want to turn to more of the educational and classroom perspective. I'm going to argue that theories are like glasses. Glasses, when we put them on our face, they shape what we see. They shape how we might see it, where we focus, and what we might miss. Every lens that we put on offers a slightly different perspective. While they can help us clarify some things, they can also distort or obscure other things. Our different lenses in our glasses are then different theoretical perspectives that we can try on to see and explain the world around us. Let's play with this metaphor a little bit. There are many different types of glasses, and there are many different types of theories. First of all, we have non-prescription glasses, just plain glass that we might put on our face, and we can think about this as kind of standard theoretical thinking. Wearing any glasses at all changes our vision. So we're looking for patterns and explanations and insight. We're not just trusting our gut and what we know, we're trying to structure what we've observed. An example of this is anytime you're out in the world and you think to yourself, I wonder why such and such thing happened. We can also put on prescription glasses, and those are kind of like our foundational theories. They're the thing that helps us bring the world into focus with these broad and enduring theories. Prescriptions offer a clear and consistent way of explaining many situations. One of these foundational social science theories is the theory of homophily, which is the argument that like attracts like. So similar people are attracted to each other, and similar groups are attracted to each other. We can put on tinted lenses, maybe they're even sunglasses, and the different tint could offer a different disciplinary or critical perspective. And these tints color the shades of how we interpret a situation. Different disciplines or critical perspectives highlight different values, assumptions, or power structures. You might put on a psychological lens if you're in the field of psychology, in which case any situation that you're looking at in the world, you're going to be thinking and seeing how someone's internal mental processes are influencing or involved in that situation. If you put on a communication lens, instead of thinking about those internal mental processes, we're going to be looking at those interactions and the meaning that's being made between people or within a person. We might put on a feminist lens, and there we might be focusing in more on issues of gender equity and power, because that feminist lens, that certain green lens, is highlighting those things in our vision. We could also put on magnified lenses, and these could be perspectives for specific instances. They help us zoom in on specific texts or interactions or events and help us interpret that highly contextual meaning in a detail. For example, narrative theory helps us understand how stories shape meaning, and face theories help us understand how politeness works in conversation. Another type of glasses or a theoretical lens could be those with blinders or even safety glasses that are extra thick to provide protection. And these might be considered very narrow theories. These sharpen a particular area but can block out other important contexts. But that may oversimplify and maybe ignore some other important social, emotional, or cultural factors. These theories that are very narrow can protect us, but they can also limit our thinking or present some biased worldviews. An example of this in business is rational choice theory, which assumes that individuals always make rational decisions, but that ignores that people can make decisions based on emotion or social norms, and we also have irrational behavior and erratic thinking. Our bifocal could be theories that are addressing tension, so holding multiple truths in tension with each other, analyzing contradictions and paradoxes, and recognizing that dualities exist where both and are true. An example of this is relational dialectics theory, which focuses on the contradictions in our social relationships, mostly our interpersonal and intimate relationships. But a contradiction is that we often really want connection with a person, but we also want that independence at the same time. And those things can be in conflict with each other, and both can be true at the same time. We also might consider a bifocal to be using two theories concurrently with each other. So these present different explanations for the same phenomenon that's occurring, and they can either complement or contradict each other, but using multiple theories can offer us insight into a fuller picture. Similar partners may attract each other, like homophily theory would suggest, but they may also struggle with codependence, like relational dialectics theory tries to explain, because they want that connection, but they also want that independence, but they're so similar that they keep coming back together for connection. So we can see how theories could help us address tensions, and multiple theories can help us explain things better. And then finally, not all theories are created equal. We have novelty glasses, and we might have different theories. Let's just call them that. We could have clown glasses, so they're extra big glasses, right, that don't even fit on your face, and these might be considered an overzealous theory. They could exaggerate certain ideas or overgeneralize to get attention. It might be over the top, oversimplified, or sensationalized, and these kinds of theories can be engaging or fun to play with, fun to read about in a news article or listen to on a podcast, but they might not always be rigorous or reliable. We also have trendy theories. Shutter shades were popular when I was in college. And these are fashionable or edgy theories, but they don't help us much with thinking clearly. And sometimes these trendy theories can be found in emerging fields, pop culture, and other buzzword-heavy conversations. They may have potential, right? A shutter shade could be cool, but it probably needs some refinement and some specifying. An example of this is the TikTok theory that emerged, quiet quitting. People were kind of just throwing this theory around at first, but over time the thinking was improving, and now we're trying to get at what these concepts are and what the relationship between these different experiences that we have and quiet quitting is. We might also have disguise glasses, so the big nose and the mustache maybe, and those could be our pseudoscientific theories. I'm not going to get into it. I'm sure you can think of pseudoscience theory. There are lots of different classes and theoretical perspectives that we can try on. And just like no single pair of glasses is perfect, no theory is either. Every lens has its strengths and its limitations, and we just can't get the whole picture from a single lens. The more glasses we're willing to try on, the more theoretical perspectives we're willing to look at the world through, the better equipped we are to be able to analyze, empathize, and explain what's happening in the world around us. When you're in class and your professor starts talking about theory, I encourage you to think about it like a pair of glasses. So, if I believe what the professor says to be true about this theory, how can I look around at my work life, my home life, my school life, my relationships, and see what this theory can do to help me think more deeply about what's going on, or to potentially explain those things that you've observed and noticed in your life. I promise theories are a lot more useful than they initially seem on the surface.